Hello everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp, and this episode is one where we take a look at games which had a few performance issues at launch.
Oh no, for the most part, they're most certainly some of the worst performing games, so we can look at if there's been an improvement.
Exactly. So what are the worst performing games and how have they improved on Nintendo Switch 2? Well, let's find out. Let's kick off then with an absolute monster of a title, not because it's big, not because it's pretty, because it's a bit of a state on Switch 1, and that's the Blair Witch project.
Yeah, Blair Witch was the name of the game, and it is a first-person survival horror walking sim. Ties into the events of the first film. I think there's been 3 films now or something like that.
Wow. In
that series. And it's a good game. It is a good game to play. Very creepy at times. The main issue on the Switch 1, well, there were a few issues, but the main one was certainly how blurry it looked. Very blurry in places. There were some frame rate issues as well, and a lot of pop-in. Now, obviously, some of these things just won't be fixed with a brute force performance boost, but hopefully some of them have.
So you could say it's the Blair Witch?
The Blair Witch would be very apt in its description, yes.
Excellent.
Well done.
So we ran this one through frame rate software, and as you can see on the screen, a couple of fluctuations, things like frame time fluctuations, definitely as you turn the camera, and the occasional drop here and there. Not perfect.
No, the issue with blurriness is what I want to talk about though, on the Switch 1 to begin with again. Because the game used like a grain effect.
Yeah, film grain, yeah.
Film grain effect anyway. And obviously there's a lot of fog and stuff like that. So some of it can be explained, but if you look at the quality of the picture, because of the resolution with those effects as well, it really did a disservice to what I think they were trying to go for.
It really does. I picked up the Switch 1 version to do the frame capture, and the dog looked like he was made out of crosshatches.
Yes, yeah. And even the parts that are meant to be foggy and whatnot, they just have a weird look. It looks like when you used to have to tune in your TV, I'm going way back, you know, and you weren't quite there, you were nearly there, and you're having to press like plus or minus to get there, and it just had that weird snow effect to it, you know, like staticky weirdness.
Yeah.
It just looks like that.
I know exactly what you mean. I know the Americans are going to be loving the word tune.
Yeah.
Tune in your TV.
C-H-U-N-E.
Yeah, mate, tune in that TV. When we played it on Switch 2, I think it's fair to say that the performance improvements were definitely evident, as were the visual.
Yes, so now it looks more, I would say, as they had intended, in that there is that fog. It builds that atmosphere, but you don't just have that really odd, again, static for want of a better way of describing it, that seems to be on screen. You mentioned the dog character, just anything, any of the little items on the floor, you know, the foliage and stuff. Was it foliage?
Foliage.
Foliage is the word, isn't it? Obviously, because you're in the forest. It just looks crisper. It's not perfect, but it's certainly an improvement.
It really is. When we're talking about games that use dynamic resolution scaling, it just means they can hold that top resolution more consistently, which looks a lot better.
It really does, yeah. There may well still be better ways of playing this, I don't know, but this is definitely an improvement on playing it on the Switch 1.
Frame rate analysis shows that it is locked at 30 now most of the time, with maybe 1 or 2 frame drops. I think this one, Glenn, is probably the most interesting one for me in the whole video. It's the game Vampyr, do you remember that?
Yeah, Vampyr or Vampyr, I think it's officially said, but very good game. Very interesting game where you're turned into a vampire at the beginning. It's kind of a third-person action game, I guess, but it has that side to it where your decisions make a difference as you move in through the story. And it's also a game that the Switch 1 didn't do justice to.
No, it didn't. So if we begin then with the Switch 1 itself, now we've run the same exact frame rate capture, and it just tells you all the issues in one go. So first we've got the frame rate, which is pretty shocking. I thought it was all right when I played it.
Yeah, no, you really do notice it, especially if you start running through the streets. You'll see that the drops in frame. If you try to turn that camera, it's almost quite nauseating, isn't it?
It's bad. Those frame pacing issues are quite clear.
Yeah, they really are. And aside from the frame rate / frame pacing issues, there was also a resolution issue with the game looking quite blurry at times, or I say at times for the vast majority of the time.
Definitely. This is one where they kind of squeezed it into Switch 1, I think.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
People were saying, oh, it's one of those ports almost, where the dynamic resolution scaling really has to do some work. But not just that. Things like in the background, you had that frame rate throttling of animations.
Yeah, and it's one of the most obvious, stark, obvious examples of it I think I've seen on the Switch. Like sometimes the characters are so far in the distance that you let it pass. Here they don't have to be that far away from you, and they literally, like, it's like the old flick books, you know, when you used to draw pictures on a bit of paper and flick the book. They just come in frame by frame. They don't even move. There's no animation at all, and then suddenly they'll just click into life.
Yeah, sometimes they do like 10 to 12 FPS, and it kind of looks stylistic.
Yeah.
Here they're blooming teleported.
It looks like a puppet being moved along on a stick, and then suddenly they just start to animate, and it's very, very jarring. And yeah, all of those issues lead to what is a good game not being unplayable, but it has that feel to it just because it's just a bit messy, isn't it?
It is. It is sadly just a bit messy. Switch 2 doesn't fix all of those issues, but it does improve a lot of them.
Yes, it does. So first and foremost, the frame rate is certainly more stable now, as is the frame pacing. Funny, because we played this one first. We played the Switch 2 one first, and you're looking at it thinking it looks all right. Yeah. You know, clearly not a massive improvement, and then you put the Switch 1 back in, sorry. Forgetting how it plays, and you're like, oh bloody hell, okay, no, it's a big improvement, but it's a big improvement because it had such a low starting point. Yeah. You know? Yeah, I think things like the resolution do make a real difference again to the feel of the game, the ambience, the lighting effects and fog kind of look more as they should on Switch 2. Yes, they do. And there is still some blurring on the Switch 2, the character models in particular. Your character, you'll notice it on him, but the backgrounds seem to have been firmed up a bit. But it doesn't lose that feeling of ambience with things like fog and whatnot. It's set in the, it's like just after World War I believe. Is it Victorian? I mean, it's Victorian era would have ended by then, but you still have that feeling of it, don't you? It's obviously, you know, 18, 20 years after that period. So the buildings still look the same, don't they, in some places. Next up, Glenn, we've got Contra Operation Galuga, which we were really looking forward to. And then there was like a bit of controversy around the Switch version. Yeah, a lot of the issues revolved around the look of the game, the generic look. People felt it didn't really have the feel of a classic Contra game. But then you had the technical issues as well, of course. People complained about frame rate drops and stuttering, as well as some input latency, I believe, was voiced at the time too. I'll be honest, I didn't ever feel the latency. No, I think in my ancient age, I've got latency, so I couldn't even tell. Yeah, you could well be right. But we did notice a few drops when we played it back in the day, and we did have a couple of strange glitches, to be fair. Did. And those went on to be patched, I believe. They did, yes. So now playing it on the Switch 2, you're looking at a much smoother frame rate, albeit it is locked to 30 frames per second. Yeah, it seems like the frame pacing here is potentially what the issue was before. I don't remember if we frame capped when it first came out, but I didn't feel a huge amount of, you know, those delays and things like that. But you can see the frame pacing now is absolutely perfect. So maybe that was the issue. It could well have been frame pacing, yeah. I'll be honest, this is one of those games, you know, the ones we've looked at in this list so far, you could feel, you know, me personally I'm talking about, you could feel the issues. Yeah. This was one that it didn't feel that bad to me in the first place, you know, so it's nice to see now you have got a locked 30. I'm sure some people would prefer 60, but at least that will fix any frame rate / pacing issues. Obviously we spoke about the look of it, the visual look, that's not going to change, and we only had a quick playthrough, not enough to see if there were any glitches or anything, but like you said, that I think that had been patched anyway before all this. Plays fine if you can get past the look, which some people had an issue with, then, and the price actually, saying that it's pretty expensive for the length of the game. It's a decent game. The last one then is Harvestella. Now, I think loads of people loved this game when it came out. I really loved it. Yeah, we spoke about this the other day. I forget why. Was it a sales video? It must have been a sales video. And we were saying it's one of those games that some people really absolutely loved and would, you know, defend to the hilt. And others had some issues with, because it's one of those where it combines action and farming. And that doesn't necessarily always get both right. But whichever side of the fence you sit on, this is just about performance anyway. Exactly. And performance originally was generally okay when you were in an environment, as long as it wasn't near your farm. The farm made things chug. So, and that's where you spent a lot of time. It was right outside your house. You'd see the frame rate come down. Also, load times between areas were a little too long, and it was like, you have to do these things so much, it just became irritating. I've just booted this one up quite briefly. The frame rate's so much better. You know, you had 30-ish, as we say, with a few drops. Now you've got 30 constant. Frame pacing is better, but those load times, man, they're like 1 or 2 seconds. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's another area that we haven't necessarily mentioned in all the games, but generally you'll see one of the biggest differences in when playing a Switch 1 game on the Switch 2, isn't it? Yeah, it just makes a big difference to your overall experience. And I think although a short one here, Harvestella is much nicer to play on Switch 2. So if you're considering it or you're put off by some of the early reviews and performance feedback, now is a really good time to check it out. You can usually get it on sale like we had on this weekend. Yeah, absolutely right. So there we have another 4 games that performed quite badly when they were on the Switch 1 and have seen an improvement on Switch 2. Do let us know of any others that you feel could be in this series, and we will have a look at them when we get round to it, and there'll be another episode of this out fairly soon.
Absolutely. Thank you to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoyed the content. And as always, for all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya.